Hi everyone, welcome back to Present Pilgrimage. It's Jennifer.
And Yabo.
And in this podcast, we're going to talk about something that's very close to our heart and a lot of the reason why, and one of the main kind of underpinning motivations that we do this podcast.
Yeah. So, about 20 years ago, a woman named Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality. And we're going to post her TED Talk on our Facebook page at facebook.com/present pilgrimage. And intersectionality is represented as an analytic framework that attempts to identify how interlocking systems of power impact those who are the most marginalized in society. So, for instance, in her talk, Kimberly Crenshaw was talking about when we talk about Black Lives Matter, well, she didn't say Black Lives Matter, but police brutality against Black people. The fact that it's against Black people is one thing, but then we forget the names of Black women, like Sandra Bland. We know Sandra Bland's name. We know 500 names of Black men that were killed at the hands of the police. And so the gender piece also gets a further marginalization. And then you have someone like me that, in addition to being Black and female, I'm also an immigrant and from an African country. And so I get pegged down the pole even more. And so understanding the complexity that intersectionality brings into our political landscape, into problem solving, is very key. Like I was saying in a previous podcast, Kamala Harris, as a front runner for the Democratic ticket for the presidential bid, is experiencing crap because her parents were immigrants. She's not an immigrant. She's a natural-born American citizen. But now they're bringing the birther argument to her, saying she's not truly born in the U.S., A. B, they're saying that as a woman, they're bringing up her dating history. And this is them not even trying to say, oh, she's Black, so that, for a lot of America, oh, she's Black, why is she bothering to run? Oh, she's a female, why is she bothering to run? So that's where intersectionality and our hidden biases comes up. Intersectionality asks us to look at multiple layers of a complex issue so that we can move past our hidden biases, bring them to light, deal with them, and move on. So I felt it was very important that we talk about intersectionality. We often talk about white and Black issues, but there's gender, there's immigrant status, there's class,
education,
there's education, economics, socioeconomic factors. And so as we look at the presidential race, as we look at solving complex situations in our society, I think it's really important that we're aware of how intersectionality works.
This would be a great, I appreciate and I also feel compassion for people who put themselves in the public spotlight because they hold themselves up for discussion like this. And all of a sudden, you as a person get, held up for the whole world to scrutinize and pick apart, which is something I think that you kind of, have to agree to when you become a public figure.
Yeah.
But at least when we have these talks, we can look at it in a way as to have a productive discussion to break down assumptions about someone like Kamala Harris.
Right.
Even though we don't know her personally.
Right.
But people think that based on their own presuppositions that they know who she is or what she represents or what she stands for. So, at the very least we can have through a lens of intersectionality kind of have a discussion around what people's perception of someone like Kamala Harris is, or what they're saying she is.
Right. I think that part of the thing, the goal here, is to help our audience with their processes of thinking, so that we move out of binary thinking. She's not just a woman. She's not just Black. She's not just the daughter of immigrant parents. She is a complex human who who has put herself on the line and has had to have thick skin for this.
Absolutely.
Right?
I can't imagine.
I mean, I can't imagine. I can't do it. My skin is not that thick. I can't do it. But I wonder, what are your thoughts around intersectionality, audience? And how is bias showing up for you? I think we all have bias.
So, yeah, but what's an exercise that we could do to highlight that? Can we put down for our own life or for someone else's kind of breakdown? So, Yabo and I just came up with a cool exercise around this. And why don't you...
Okay, so when you meet a person, I want you to become very aware of the first thing you do to quantify the person. So our brains, what I'm asking you to do is to be superhuman. Your brain, if you leave your brain alone, your brain is going to default to a certain thing. Your brain is going to see something and say, Jennifer, female, white, blonde, in her 40s, or whatever, right? That's what your brain does. So I want you to pay attention. I want you to pay attention to the categories of your brain. So let me give you a really, really awesome example.
Okay.
I was at a training a couple of weeks after I had my surgery. I went with 2 coworkers to an Enneagram training. There were about 25 people in the room. We walked in right in the nick of time, sat down, and the first person in the far left corner, on the far right corner of the room, started introducing themselves. And like I said, there were about 25 people. The second person and the third person were of East Indian origin from Asia. And we went through the whole room, and I was real loopy that day, was post-surgery. In fact, I had to take a nap at lunch. So the second day of the training, at the end of the second day of the training, and let's not forget, I went with 2 people I already knew. End of the second day of the training, they played a little bit of music to get us loosened up before we headed home, and they played Here Comes the Sun. And the lady I was with said, Iyabo, who sang the song again? I should know. This is my generation of music. So Iyabo pulls out her phone and Googles it, and it's the Beatles. And I said to my friend, I said, you know, this is not really my genre of music, right? And that was the moment. Remember, this is the end of the second day of an 8-day training. That was the moment I looked around the room and I said, oh, snap, I'm the only black person in this room. And I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, I really am not feeling as good as I think I'm feeling medical-wise, because it was so new to me for that not to be the first thing I noticed. But when I replayed it in my mind, I realized 2 things. One, I was with 2 white women that I was totally comfortable with. So I felt safe psychologically. And the second and third person that introduced themselves were people, a man and a woman of color. So my guard went down even more, and probably also still being in recovery, right? So I had this monumental moment of, oh my God, I was in a room full of 27 white people, and it took me 2 days to notice I was the only white person. 25 white people and 2 people of color, and it took me 2 whole days to realize I was the only black person in the room.
But you said because of those factors, so if I walked in that same room, none of that would go process in, that whole process would not.
That's exactly right. And so the 2 people I was with, they were like, you mean every time you walk into a room, you gauge that? I said, honey, my brain does it. I don't have to help it. Right?
Yes.
That's what my reality. I walk into a room, and I think also because, you know, I came in stressed late, and I saw these 2 Indian people. I'm like, okay, I'm not alone. I had my 2 friends that were there. Okay, I'm not alone. So something in the physical part of my brain worked to say, you don't have to pay attention to that today. When do you not pay attention to your gender, your race, the things that make you human? What spaces do you enter into that you're not concerned about your gender or your race or whatever?
And I think when you're saying that about feeling safe, and how you're highlighting for yourself. And for me as a woman, it would probably be how many women are in the room versus how many men.
Right.
But what are some things that unfold that happen for you to feel safe? I think that was striking how you said immediately when the two East Asian people introduce themselves, like right away, you sort of like, oh, okay. Like establishing in a room full of people you don't know well, or how to establish that sense of comfort, or not, I don't want to say threat, but just levels of...
And it's not a physical threat. Like, I didn't feel I'm not physically safe. Do I have a weapon? It wasn't like that. It was safety of, I'm around my people. We enjoy this kind of learning. We're going to open up and be vulnerable and talk about our experiences on the Enneagram. And I can bond with you, and I can go to lunch with you. And, after this workshop, I'd love to get to know that person. That kind of safety where you feel a part of something.
That's where, back to the workshop, I think we want to start to establish that and acknowledge difference and acknowledge the barriers that are in place because of cultural and systemic racism and his history. And then how can we move into, as you're saying, enabling that feeling of safety and comfort and vulnerability, even recognizing the differences together, or recognizing some of those potential barriers.
Yeah, I think this is a thing of privilege, right? Privilege means you, Jennifer, would have walked into that room and probably, knowing you, given your background, you probably would have noticed the people of color and being like, oh, I think they're husband and wife team. Let me get to know them, right? But when you enter into spaces, it's good to just count. How many spaces, like today, how many places did I go where I was unaware of my gender and my race? Right? Or my national origin, or my sexual. Like, I have sexuality privilege. I walk into places and I don't go around thinking all day long, I am a heterosexual woman. That's a privilege, right? The same way you don't go around all day saying, I'm a white woman, right? You just are, and you're moving through your day dealing with life. That's how privilege works.
And I think for white women, it would be a good exercise just to note how many people who aren't white are in that room, and not as a way of quantifying or in a way, but just to validate, acknowledge, that person is the only person of color from a different, racial background than everybody else. Maybe they would like to feel more comfortable. Maybe they don't feel as comfortable as I do. Right.
And even in this classroom that I was in, there were 4 men. And towards the end of the training, one of the women said, I just want to thank the men that are here, right? And the men were like, yeah, we've been like girled out, right? They were so girled out. So that was a place where their privilege of being white male all of a sudden did not have currency. Mm-hmm. It didn't have power in the room. They were in the minority. They were outside of a comfort zone. And they were well aware, and us women really didn't pay that any attention until the one woman said it, and then we were like, well, yeah, you're right, we would like guys to come more and more to these types of trainings, and they don't, so thank you for coming. So I say this to say that oftentimes when we talk about minority issues, privilege issues, intersectionality, too often it puts white people on the defensive. And I'm glad I was able to talk about men in that class so that we move away from that defensiveness as a response or reactivity or reaction to when you find yourself in these places. The only way you can loosen it up, and that's all I'm asking you to do, is loosen it up, right? The only way you can loosen it up is to go through it, to be in those spaces, to be the person who has to lay down her privilege because it's not relevant in this space today.
And back to one of our earlier podcasts is, how many times have you put yourself, as a white woman, have I put myself in a position where I am a minority?
Right.
And I feel like there's no better experience than being in that position. Right. Even though it's maybe scary or hard, there's no better way of understanding
Right.
than if you put yourself in a position where you are a minority.
Right. I have a friend, Ellen, who went to a Bible study at a black church with me one time. Well, no. Stop, scratch that. She didn't go with me. She was the one that got the invitation and was like, Yaba, I want you to come along with me to this Bible study. I'm going to go do some craftivism for this Bible study. And I went with her and I was like, Ellen, you were like the only the only white person on this side of town, talk less of in that church. And she was like, yeah, I find myself in those situations often. And she was comfortable. She wasn't, you're very comfortable around people that look differently from you. Most of the people I hang around are like that. But we got to do more of that because why? Because then you get to see my humanity. Then you get to see me as a full person mirroring you and not, oh, that black person, oh, that woman, oh, that immigrant, right? My intersectionality speaks to my complexity that is as complex as yours. What I would ask you to do, my invitation to you this week is to make and hold eye contact with people that look the most different from you. I try and do that with gay men, right? Like gay men don't even see women oftentimes, it feels like, but I will look and hold eye contact. And I know one of the things us foreigners say about Americans is how we feel so invisible. Like in a conversation, 5 people are having conversation. Here's another aspect of intersectionality, ageism. Mm-hmm. I was in a group, an older woman, everybody was going around giving their opinion, and somehow this older woman was overlooked. And she called them out on it and said, you young people render me invisible because I'm older. And of course, the younger people didn't think they had done that, but I think somewhere in their brain, it just kind of happened.
And also, right? I think language literacy or ability, or to know knowledge of the language. If someone's an immigrant, they're freshly here, they're learning the language. It's easy to devalue what they're saying just
right.
because they don't have all the words to put it out there in a way
right.
that's super articulate.
Right. And the same thing, let's not forget a very critical segment of the population, the differently abled. I have a friend, Kyle. Kyle has, I forget what it is. I think it's cerebral palsy. And Kyle, his articulation is not very clear. And I literally have to slow all the way down. I can't be in a rush with Kyle. And I look at his mouth and intuit what it is he's saying. And I say, Kyle, I did not hear you clearly. Is this what you were trying to say? Is this what you said? One of the most incredibly smart human beings I have ever met in my life. So smart, so deep. And I wish I could have much more conversation with him, but I know I get a little tired because I always seem to run into him at the most inopportune times. And that focus it takes to just enter into his world, his languaging and capacity to language, really important thing to do. And sometimes I just don't have the time, or I'm like, text me, because he loves to text. And we do engage. I continue to engage. But even the differently abled among us, how often do we avert our eyes?
And you know how much effort he makes to overcompensate. And when he talks,
yes,
and he looks you in the eye. He says his words he's so pleasant, the way his delivery, and he really makes an effort to get something, in that whatever moment of time you're talking to him.
And I really appreciate him. But that's how we deal with intersectionality. So that's a black man, differently abled. That's a form of intersectionality. So let's not just do the race thing. Shout out to Kyle. So this week, your assignment, folks, look folks in the eye. Take the time to see their humanity and their complexity and celebrate them. Cool.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Talk soon. Bye.